The Vietnam War lasted from 1954 to 1975. It refers to the period in which the U.S. and other members of the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization joined forces with the Republic of South Vietnam to subdue communist forces consisting of the South Vietnamese guerrillas known as the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army. It ended with the communist victory in April 1975, and the Vietnam experience became known as the only war America had ever lost.
Could you share about how you adapted to the military lifestyle?
It was tough. It was really very, very tough. So you take yourself and you say, okay, you're no longer at home. You go in the military. They take literally all your clothes off, cut your hair down, and then put this green uniform on you, and it says you're now in the Army. So it's a shock to begin with on the very first day, and then you have to work with it, or you lose it. I mean, so it's a mental situation as well as physical, because everything becomes physical. You're running all the time. You're doing PT, physical training, and you're adapting to the military life. And that's what they do. They strip you of everything you had as a civilian, bring you into the military, and now you are part of it. And it's quite something to overcome. And it takes a lot of this, but I had to adapt sometimes the hard way, because I was one of those who fought for my civilian life, and I said, I don't want to do this, and next thing you know, you had no choice, and then you adapt to it and say, okay, I'm part of it. And you'll talk to any soldier or sailor, they'll tell you the same thing.
Can you give us details about your trip to Vietnam? What unit did you serve in, and what was your responsibility as a U.S. combat soldier in Vietnam?
Being assigned as a pilot, in 1968 was the worst year for pilots and also for our servicemen. We lost more servicemen in 1 year, 1968, than we did probably in any other year during the 10 years of Vietnam. It was not a pretty war by any means. And we went over, we were just in our cause, we were guests in the country of Vietnam, and we were supposed to understand their customs and then adapt to it. But we literally, we stayed within our own, like our base. I stayed on my base. We had helicopters there. We had 1,000 men that actually were on there. And so I would fly missions during the day, come back, and sleep there at night. We had officers' quarters, had an officers' BOQ, as we called it, and then also we had an officers' club, so we could go drink beer after a mission. You know, it was one of those things that was so very hot. I'm talking about hot, meaning 110, 115, 125 degrees a day. So you would drink water, you would just sweat it out. You drink beer, it would sweat out. And just the way it was. So hot. So you're always looking for that. But I was assigned to a helicopter unit called the 129th Assault Helicopter Company. We were 2 airlift platoons and 1 gunship platoon. So the airlift would be the ones that actually go and pick up the troops or pick up the supplies and then take them out and deliver them. And the gunships would follow us, and they would actually shoot up the area before we would come in and land, and also they would protect us when we're taking off. So it was a multi-purpose thing. But we moved the troops from point A to point B. A lot of hills. I was in what they call 2 Corps, right along the central coast, and it went from right here, like Newport, going all the way up to Mount Wilson, 6,000 feet. So literally your mountains and up and down all day. So it was jungle, a lot of dense jungle. But our guys were fighting in this stuff all the time. So we were right on what they called the Ho Chi Minh Path. The VA, North Vietnamese Army, infiltrated South Vietnam, coming down through these trails. And a lot of the trails would end up going into the mountains, and into the mountains they would have hospitals, bunks, they had all kinds of things, and then they would come out and go out and infiltrate at night. So during the day they were friendly, at night they were enemy. And that's just the way you had to live over there.
So I know you already mentioned 1968, but what was the worst thing about Vietnam and what was the best thing?
Well, the worst was 1968 and 69. It was what they called Tet Offensive, T-E-H-T, I think. But it's actually the Lunar New Year celebration for the Vietnamese. They do this every year. They do it right here in Westminster. They have big ceremonies and stuff, but it's called Tet. And what happened is that Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Communist Party in North Vietnam, said, I want all my men, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese, to attack all Americans. So they came at us full force. They were blowing up our ammo depots, blowing up our oil, our fuel, everything, anything, blowing up helicopters if they could. That's why we lost so many people in 1968. It was very, very scary. So 1968-69 were pretty instrumental in my life and formulated my opinion of what we should be as in terms of people and a society and how we can help people. I think we really did help the Vietnamese people. There's quite a few that have come home. I say come home because we brought them home to America. They were called boat people, and they were getting off out of Vietnam and they were just getting anywhere they could so that they could be brought here. Many came to Southern California, many went to France, wherever, all around the world. But it happened because the Americans went to Vietnam and made it happen for them.
How did you feel about going to war in Vietnam before and during your time in combat?
I was pretty much prepared because the Army got you prepared for it. You don't know until you really get into it and you get the first shot at. And constantly they were shooting at us. When I arrived in Vietnam, I spent 3 days in a holding area waiting to be picked up to go to my unit because Tet Offensive was going on. And when I arrived, there were rockets going off, there were bombs going off, there were machine gun going, there were bombs from airplanes. The helicopters were shooting up the perimeter with machine guns. It was like, I'm here. I can't believe this. So there were 3 of us. We went down to what we called the base exchange, and we bought a bottle of Jack Daniels and 3 Cokes, so we drank the Jack Daniels before we drank the Cokes. We were so scared. But then 3 days later I was assigned to my unit, and it was like, then it was just, you're on a ride. And it all became very surreal. Almost like, is this for real? Is this really happening? And then you start to melt into it, feel it on a day-to-day basis. And you had routine, get up, do this, do that, go out, fly a mission. You didn't know day-to-day if you were going to live. You used to sit and watch, wait for all the helicopters to come back. In my unit, there was 5 that would go out every day, and we would wait until all 5 got back. Sometimes they didn't.
How did the war affect you emotionally at the time of combat and in the long term?
Very stressful. You had to deal with war as an individual because you can't do it as a group. And let's just say this small group of people right here, we were all the same unit together. We had what we called call signs. Like mine was, okay, my last name's Grimm. So Reaper. I was Grim Reaper. So I was Reaper. But you have a different nickname. Or I might know your first name, but that's all. Because you didn't want to get close to people that you're near. Because of what I just described a minute ago about waiting for the helicopters to come back. Or if you're on a situation where there's 3 or 4 or 5 helicopters going into what we called an LZ, a landing zone, do they all make it? It's individualized. Each person can carry the weight of the war on their shoulders. Others can't. They break down. In the early days when people came back from Vietnam, there were a lot of guys that just went crazy. But a lot of that was because the Army brought you back. You landed in San Francisco, got a pass or an airplane ticket to go home. And it was very difficult for many of the guys. So a lot of them end up in what they call PTSD groups, which is post-traumatic stress. That still goes on. Even 50 years later, there's still a lot of guys that just can't adapt and haven't adapted. I was very fortunate, so I was able to get back into society. Like I said, I went into law enforcement. I still was flying helicopters, enjoyed it a lot. And then I got married, started a family, and that kind of helped me trudge forward.
How and when did you return home from Vietnam?
Well, I came back alive. It was about April 5th or thereabouts, 1969. And I just had finished flying probably the worst mission of my life. And it was very scary because what had happened, it was a night mission, and we had a company of Korean, the Korean Army was there. Now, Vietnam was not just the Americans in it. We had Germans, we had Australians, there were some British and Americans. So there was Southeast Asia Treaty Organization is what it was. A lot of people think it's NATO, but it was not NATO. So they were there, and we even had some New Zealanders, but we all had a different area of responsibility. So in the area that I was in, we had Koreans and Americans. So the helicopter company I was in, we took care of both Americans and Koreans, and we moved them all around. We did all this stuff. But the Koreans were under attack, And earlier in the day, my platoon leader had gone in to try and help these people, and he got shot. The helicopter got shot up pretty bad, and he got shot through both legs. So he went in the hospital. He lived. So that night we were called to fly this mission, and I had been out all day with a brand new pilot who I was just teaching the area to. And so I was already dressed and we were ready to go. We just refueled the helicopter and we just went on this mission. It turned out to get darker and darker as we were doing what we were doing. Now, I always tell people, close your eyes, and no matter how tight you can close your eyes, it wasn't dark enough. That's not dark enough. It was so black. There were no lights in Vietnam. No street lights, nothing, where I was at. So, as dark as it could be, we're flying into an LZ. The first aircraft went in and said it's hot. It means he's taking hits, getting shot at, so he pulled out. Well, I was right behind him, and as we're coming in, so he pulls out, I'm already committed. We get into the LZ, and we land. And we're trying to get down low. We can't see a thing. We're trying to get down low so we can pick up wounded. We threw our ammunition out the door. That's what the crew chief and the door gunner were doing. That's when the door gunner got shot through the chest. We didn't even know it. He was laying in the back. All that was off, and we're still trying to get down. And then a Korean popped off, or what we call it, popped off, meaning started a flare, like a road flare, but this is a ground flare. Put it on, and it was right underneath my chin bubble. So I turned my head like this, and the pilot that I had, a brand new pilot, was sitting up very high, brand new. So I kept saying, get down, get down. Well, I'd been there long enough, so I knew that there was an armor plate here. I'd get down behind it and hold myself in a position where I wouldn't get hurt, hopefully. Okay, so anyhow, 2 rounds went through my front windshield, went into the overhead, and then one went into his forehead. Went actually right through his helmet and into his forehead. Now, you know it's pretty thin up there, right? His forehead was so thick, it was just, it looked like the size of my arm. But when it happened, it was like a balloon of blood just went pop. It just went off all over the place. So anyhow, I pulled off and we flew the helicopter to a hospital. He was saved, the door gunner died, and I never saw him again until 40 years later. I'll show you a picture, we're together. And I found out that he lived. I never knew. I never wanted to know, because remember about the names? You always had call signs or nicknames. I didn't want to know. That's just the way the Vietnam was. But anyhow, I came home safe, and I went to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and I made a short trip home, and then I went to the flight school.
How did your family and community receive you when you came home from Vietnam? How did you feel about Vietnam when you came home?
You know, well, the family was very caring, which was nice. Because they got their son back, which was nice. I remember being at a function, called a party, and I remember people popping champagne. And you ever hear a pop? Pop? So well, as soon as they started popping those, I dropped to the floor. I was in the kitchen, I just fell to the floor, looking for cover, because that was the condition I was in. I realized it wasn't safe. I wouldn't, but I didn't think about it. It took a long time to get out of that syndrome, if you will. Just get away to know that you're safe, you're home. It's not going to happen. You're alive.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life?
I'd say very positively. Nobody likes war is not fun, and war is very serious. Whether it was World War II, Korea, Vietnam, or today's war, it's a very serious situation. But you learn a little bit more about people. What people can put up with, what they'll do. And not everybody's left-handed like me. You gotta be more flexible. It took me a long time to understand and be flexible, because I was very regimented. I was very, very regimented when I first came out of the service. But that's all I knew. So when you think about the first 18 years of your life, and then, your family, friends, all the rest of that stuff, church, and then as soon as you go in the service, it's like a great big abyss, and you come out of it at whatever point. And then you start your life all over again. So it takes quite a while to come about.